Breaking news about exams.
Latest statistics.
Bring you up to date. Breaking news now, the latest.
Nobody could have predicted it.
Many more families are going to lose loved ones before their time.
News of a potential
The world
COVID-19
has changed
record number
forever.
of cases across New Haven and Seaford.
The steps we took will define us. The steps he took will define our reality.
There is light at the end of the tunnel.
Not all breaking news is bad news. The good news is that Jesus has come in history, and that breaking news is news that affects all of us, just as the current breaking news affects all of us. It's a moment where each of us need to decide afresh who Jesus is and consider the impact that his life in the world has made and does make on us and our lives. Now we're going to be spending some time together today considering John the Baptist's response to Jesus' activity in the world. And John's line to his disciples was, "He must increase and I must decrease." He must increase. He must increase. He must increase. Now, in 2002, Eminem, in his song Lose Yourself, he sung, "You only get one shot. Do not miss your chance to blow. This opportunity comes once in a lifetime." You get one shot. And recently, Hamilton, as a family, we're quite addicted to the musical Hamilton. And one of the songs in there, Alexander Hamilton says, "Just like my country, I'm young, scrappy, and I'm hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot." You get one shot. I get one shot at life, one chance in life to leave a legacy. What is a legacy? Hamilton, again, it's planting seeds in a garden you never get to see. That's your legacy, your moment, your shot. He must increase, and I must decrease. He must become greater and greater. I must become less and less. That's what John the Baptist said about his moment, his shot. In chapter 3, verse 26, that we heard read to us by Wendy, our new voiceover artist, it says this, "And they came to John, and they said to him, 'Rabbi, he who is with you across the Jordan, Jesus, to whom you bore witness, look, he is baptizing, and all are going out to him.'" In other words, John, your popularity is waning. People are preferring Jesus to you. You need to change your message. In the New Living Translation, it says this, John's response was, "He must become greater and greater. I must become less and less." And in Eugene Peterson's The Message, it says, "This is the assigned moment for him, Jesus, to move into the center and where I slip off to the sidelines." And John's reply to his disciples reveals a mismatch in expectations between what his disciples, John the Baptist's disciples, thought was going to happen and what John the Baptist hoped and wanted to have happen. But what John the Baptist's reply also highlights and reveals is a clash of civilizations and a clash of kingdoms that plays out every day or everywhere in every heart. You see, just as in chapter 3 as well with Nicodemus, the greatest teacher in Israel at the time didn't understand Jesus' message. They couldn't comprehend it because Jesus said it was from above. And just as last week in chapter 2, Mary didn't know what she was asking when she told the servants to do anything Jesus said. And they took the water and poured it out. And just as the Jews last week couldn't comprehend Jesus' message when he said, "Destroy this temple and I'll rebuild it in 3 days." Jesus brings about so often rude awakenings where we thought things were one way and he reveals something completely different. The good news is what's needed isn't that we clean up our act, but that we're reborn. We're made anew, afresh. That Jesus takes center stage in our lives. That's what he wants. That's his invitation to us. But our sympathies in the reading lie with John the Baptist's disciples and his followers. They were simply riding the success and the wave of their popularity. They were enjoying the attention of being in the limelight. The history books talk about John the Baptist. He's mentioned in secular history in more ways than Jesus is, arguably. So they were anxious about their declining status. And that's something that all of us can relate to. All of us are concerned to one degree or another with our status. We suffer from what's called status anxiety. And I want us to explore together how status anxiety affects us, and then how John the Baptist's reply points to a better way, and how the gospel points to a better way. The philosopher Alain de Botton says, high status is thought by many, but freely admitted by few, to be one of the finest of earthly goods. I can remember vividly as a child, a teenager, walking to school with a group of friends and analyzing the way the group walked and who was getting the most attention, to try to establish what was it that made one person more or less popular. And in my case, what do I need to do to get more into the center of this crowd walking to school to become more popular? And what I learned as a teenager, and what we've learned throughout life, all of us have to some degree, is that what we're after and what we needed and we need to be popular is attention. The attention of others. And it was this that the father of modern economics, Adam Smith, pointed out. When he asked the question, he said, what is the purpose of all the hard work and toil that people give themselves to, all of their ambition, all of their pursuit of wealth and power? What's the purpose of it all? He says, to be observed, to be attended to be taken notice of. We are hungry for attention, and we use our shot in life to be noticed, to matter to others, to have people talk well of us. Or if we can't have them talk well of us, we'll just have them talk about us. It doesn't matter whether it's good or bad. As Oscar Wilde once said, there's only one thing worse than having everybody talk about you, and that's having nobody talk about you. In a cute YouTube video that's had over 2 million hits, a little girl simply says to the camera, "Hey, I want to be famous," and just stands there pouting and posing. And by the way that we behave, we often act as though honor and attention, like money, is a limited commodity. That's often why people struggle to encourage and honor someone else, because we're worried if everyone's looking at them, they won't be looking at me. Honor and attention, like money, is a limited commodity. And John's disciples, like the creators of Facebook, worry that if people are looking elsewhere, they can't possibly be looking at us, and that is genuinely a worry to us. How will we know that we matter? And if that was a problem for John's disciples, I want to argue that it's even more of a problem for us. And to show you why, I want to show you why in what I call a brief history of why I ought to increase and God decrease in my life. In his book about the ego, the Emeritus Professor of Psychiatry at Bristol University, Glyn Harrison, he says that from the late 1960s, what happened was that self-esteem became identified as being a subject of focus. Psychologists established that people who joined gangs, did drugs, underachieved at school, and became pregnant in their teenage years all had one thing in common. They had low self-esteem. And therefore, it was thought if we could boost people's self-esteem, we would deal with a lot of the social problems that we experienced as well. And so, what began was a program of what Glyn Harrison calls boosterism, whereby organizations and governments set about trying to boost its citizens' self-esteem. And so in 1971, we saw the arrival and emergence of L'Oreal's advert, "Because You're Worth It." And it became our mantra. The 1970s as a decade went on to be called the Me Decade, when our focus through its movies and its media messages all began emphasizing self-expression, self-worth, self-value in a way that had never happened before. In the 1980s, Gordon Gekko summed up the philosophy well in the movie Wall Street when he announced to rapturous applause, "Greed is good. Greed is good because you deserve to get what you want. Therefore, tap into your greed. Listen to your greed." Now consider this guidance material that's given to people doing assemblies in schools in the UK, given by the UK government's National Strategy for Social Emotional Aspects of Learning, SEAL. They say this: in the assembly about to deliver, the story the children are about to hear tells of some animals that live in the forest. Of all the animals, it is Mouse who has forgotten that she has her own special gift. The children are going to try to help Mouse to believe in herself. So every time Mouse says, "I'm no good, I'm only a mouse," some of the children are going to whisper, believe in yourself," several times to help her to remember that it is good to be who she is. Before they leave, ask the children and adults to whisper out loud, it's good to be me. Attitudes towards God and religion also began to change over the last few decades accordingly. Rather than trusting the Bible, we instead have been trained to trust ourselves and our opinions because I'm worth it. Or rather than submit to the faithfully handed down from generations over thousands of years traditions and beliefs, we have taken license to reinvent previously held ideas and traditionally held doctrines. Why? Because I'm worth it. Consider this. A recent Gallup poll in Newsweek reports that nearly 80% of Americans believe that there is a heaven and that they are destined to go there. Whereas only 7% of Americans believe there is a hell and that they could end up there. Heaven has become simply one more entitlement that no one, presumably even God, has a right to deny me. Because I must increase and he must decrease. That he, God, really lives to serve me. And children in churches used to sing ditties, just as we heard this morning on our WhatsApp, on our prayer group, that little ones to him belong, they are weak, but he is strong. And they used to sing, Jesus first, yourself last, and others in between. Sentiments that seem almost shocking to modern ears. Myself last? Surely not. Well, in the last few years, we've produced kids' books aimed at teaching people about God, entitled Kids, You're Special, and God Thinks You're Wonderful, Children. Or consider this song by Daigle, a Christian worship song that found its way onto the mainstream radio in the UK a couple of years ago. The lyrics go, I keep fighting voices in my mind that say I am not enough. Every single lie that tells me I will never measure up. You say I am loved when I can't feel a thing. You say I am strong when I think I am weak. And you say I am held when I am falling short. Now, I'm not saying that song or those books are wrong. I'm simply saying that they would not have existed 50 years ago. I, me, my worth, my value. It seems that the more we've emphasized self-esteem, the more fragile our egos and our sense of worth has become. In 1747, Charles Wesley wrote a hymn, the lyrics that go, we cast our crowns before thee, lost in wonder, love, and praise. I must decrease, you must increase, he must increase. Maybe I am not as special as I have been told, or as I have been trained, or as I have been conditioned to believe that I am. And I have been conditioned by my culture to believe in my specialness. And so have you. The strange twist in all of this is that psychologists have since moved on. And they no longer believe that boosting people's self-esteem is worth doing, or that it resolves the social problems that we have. In fact, what psychologists these days recognize is that an emphasis and an overemphasis on self-esteem and self-value and self-worth has actually led to a rising culture of entitlement and narcissism. Psychologists and the academics have moved on. But the trouble is, telling people that they're amazing, being told you're amazing, just feels too good to let go. It's reached a tipping point in our culture that we're no longer led by the science, we're just led by what appeals to our ego. So let's consider John the Baptist's response then to his followers to see how his perspective on himself and on the world can help us as Christians. In verse 27, he says, a person cannot receive even one thing unless it is given to him from heaven. First thing he notices and he says is, all status and value that really matters in life comes from God. You don't need to fight for your status. You don't need to sell yourself to impress others to have worth and value and get their attention. Second thing he says in verse 28, I am not the Christ, but I have been sent to come before him. We are, all of us, part of something bigger than us. And the good news is, it isn't about us. And that is good news. It's a relief. It's a weight off our shoulders. The attention that we get when we perform well and the praise that we give to people when they perform well can create a pressure that leads to anxiety that requires us to do everything we can to remain in that spotlight of praise. And so homeschooling as many of us are, when my child does something well in maths, I can be tempted to say, wow, that's amazing. You're the next Einstein. Because that's nice. It's encouraging. The trouble is, what the child hears is pressure. If I get it wrong next time, maybe I won't be the next Einstein. And that actually stifles them. Psychologists, researchers, academics tell us, because we're not meant to be the next Einstein. We're not meant to have the weight of the world and the attention of the world on our shoulders. Or as John says, I'm not the Christ. I'm not the Messiah. I'm just a very naughty boy. I will fail. I will fall short, he says. But I am part of Christ's story. I am part of something bigger. Your goal when you go to a wedding is to not upstage the bride. Our goal is to not upstage Jesus. The best man at our weddings, especially, often feels the pressure to deliver a knockout speech that takes all the attention onto himself, that everyone goes home remembering the best man. But actually the job of the best man is to serve the groom, to honor him, to help him on his way. Third thing we see, verse 29, he says, the friend of the bridegroom rejoices greatly at the bridegroom's voice. So what we see is that positive feelings of happiness, contentment, and meaning often follow what God gives us to do. Often, not always. Often God calls us to very difficult things that are very hard. But as a young Christian, someone once told me the safest place to be in your life is to be in the center of God's purposes for your life. The safest, but also the place where you'll feel most contentment is the place where you are fighting sin, submitting to truth, and using the gifts that God's given you. Those things lead to contentment and joy. And I think it's here that we're meant to find, and we do find, rest for our souls, rest from the crippling status anxiety that we suffer from, and the constant need to measure up and to matter and be noticed no matter what. So the three things we see from John is that status matters, we're part of something bigger, and that positive feelings often follow doing God's will for our lives. You are invited then, and I am invited then, to use my shot, to not throw away your shot by using it to get to know him, to serve him. Here is where contentment and meaning is. Not in having the attention of the world, but in knowing that God, your Father, you have his attention. He loves you and he cares for you. Two quick examples of this as we close. One, a man named Richard Vernbrand, who was tortured in a communist prison cell in Russia during the 1960s. He was tortured for being a Christian in a state where it is illegal to be so. He writes about his experience in the book Tortured for Christ, and in it he says this: for years we had to sit for 17 hours a day, hearing, communism is good, communism is good, communism is good, communism is good, communism is good. Christianity is stupid, Christianity is stupid, Christianity is stupid. Give up, give up, give up, give up. For 17 hours a day, for days, weeks, and months. And several Christians have asked me, he says, how we could resist such brainwashing. Well, there exists only one method to resistance of brainwashing that I know, and this is heart washing. If the heart is cleansed by the love of Jesus Christ, and if the heart loves him, you can resist all tortures. What would a loving bride not do for her groom? What would a loving mother not do for her child? If you love Jesus as a bride loves her bridegroom, then you can resist such tortures. And that perhaps is how we resist, not the brainwashing is a strong word, but the indoctrination of our culture that would want to place all the emphasis on me and my. We resist it by washing our hearts with the love of Jesus and our place in his story. Lastly, consider a more modern example of someone who, let's be honest, in the very den of status anxiety, didn't throw away her shot, but used it to focus attention not on herself, but on another. Let's watch this video.
With Sharon undecided on which act to send home, she wants to see Scarlett, Rael, and Elisa in a sing-off.
Where is she?
Whatever happens. Right.
Believe in yourself, right? You can do this.
Lisa, Sharon wants to see you again. Okay?
I would keep Scarlett. Shouldn't be sing off against Scarlett. Scarlett's good.
Sing right now. Sing from your gut.
Good luck. Scarlett, love you.
Girls, I am so sorry to make you all do this, but what do I do when there's so much talent here and the audience? I have to listen to the audience. But no matter what, I have 2 chairs and 3 girls. So I want you to all do a sing-off for me, because you're all so talented. Don't forget that, okay? Rael, you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right.
There is power in the name of Jesus. There is power in the name of Jesus. Oh, there is power in the name of Jesus to break every chain, break every chain, break every chain.
And Rael, you are fearless for a 16-year-old. You're unbelievable. But I have made my decision. I hate to do this. I hate to do it. But Scarlett, I'm going to let you go.
She did the right choice, as well. So, Sharon's final 6 girls are Deanna, Grace, Holly, Rael, Georgina, and Elisa.
I love that. He must increase and I must decrease. The breaking news of John's gospel is that your value and your worth doesn't come from the fact that you're special. It comes from the fact that he loves you. It doesn't come from the fact that the world has its attention on you, that the world's eyes are on you. This is your shot, don't throw it away. It comes from the fact that he loves you and his eyes and his attention are on you. But really, it comes from the fact that he must increase and I must decrease. He is the one who offers you new birth. He offers you new life. He offers you new purpose. He offers you new peace with God. He must increase and I must decrease. Let's pray.